I'm Dawn Marie Solis with Neuro Awesome Life and Fish in a Tree. Both organizations are neuro affirming community builders, and I'm so excited to be here with Jenna Gensic and Jennifer Brunton, both co-authors of one of my favorite books, the Actually Autistic Guide to Advocacy. And they're going to be talking to me about their next upcoming book and cool stuff that they're up to, which I'm very excited about. So I can't do all of the words of the new title because it's a really cool title, but it's about building independence, which Jenna and Jennifer, the precise moment that you're going to be talking to me about this topic is so perfect. I have been doing a lot of advocacy and patient walking, mental, intellectual walking with people about letting people have their identity, letting them have their independence, things like that. So I'm really excited to hear what you both have to say. And so, Jenna, if it's okay, if you go first, can you let people know a little bit more about you? And then Jennifer, if you want to pick it up when she's done.
Sure. So my name is Jenna, and I'm a freelance writer, editor, beyond, in addition to being a disability advocate and autism advocate. I have a son who is diagnosed autistic. He is 16 years old, and he has kind of launched my interest in advocacy and my passion for autism advocacy. I have a younger brother who's also diagnosed autistic, and that's when I was in college, I first started learning about autism through him and his diagnosis. But since I've become a mom, I've kind of deepened that interest and understanding, and I do a lot of work reaching out to outreach with the autistic adult community and learning about their lives and advice that they have. I have 4 kids. So my oldest is diagnosed autistic, and I also have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a wonderful website.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. I created a website based on a lot of the outreach that I've done with the autistic community called Learn from Autistic People. And the goal of the website is to connect parents, caregivers, teachers, therapists, just the general community with advice coming directly out of the autistic community. I found that pretty quickly that the best and the fundamentally most important advice that I ever received to help raise my son with a confident autistic identity came directly from the autistic community, hands down. So, and I was fortunate to learn that very early in my advocacy, I think, relative to some other people. And that has helped continually turn me to the autistic community for advice. And that's kind of that's where the interest for my books has come, is trying to get advice that's only coming from the autistic community rather than neurotypical experts or people who call themselves experts. So doctors, therapists, anybody else. So the advice that we together have collected has come from autistic self-advocates, but also autistic doctors and therapists and parents and autistic people of all different types of identities and communities. And I feel like that is that honors, first of all, the autistic experience, our continual efforts to reach out to them. But I just think it's the best advice. I think it's better. I think when I talk to my friends about the most fundamental, important things that I've learned, it's all things that I've learned from autistic people. So a lot of the advocacy work in the website that I've created has tried to connect people and just remind people that should be where our advocacy base comes from.
That's amazing. I, it was one of the reasons why I so loved your first book and why I reached out to you and said, hey, can we talk? Was that I felt you had done such an amazing job of putting front and center the voices you were talking about. Often that's not the case. People do research and come up with conclusions and all kinds of stuff and leave out the people they're researching and talking about. And this happens
Yeah.
to every marginalized community, not just autistic people. So I
And
go ahead.
yeah, and yeah, that's true. And when I first started reaching out to the autistic community about, I mean, almost 10 years ago now, it really was not easy to find resources that were published by autistic people, like online. Like the first things, you know, in Google that I was looking for were all non-autistic, um, quote unquote experts. So now I don't think that's so much the case now. 10 years later, it's becoming much better in that regard. But that was one of the main reasons for starting my website was, what if I have people that are interested like I am in just hearing from people who are identifying as autistic? Like if, and I just like, can I create a hub that where people could go to this website and know, okay, at least anybody publishing an article on here is, you know, is diagnosed autistic. So that's why I started. And there's plenty of other, and there were some at the time, there were other places like that at the time, and there's many more now. But um, that's where that started, was trying to offer that resource to people who might also be interested in that too.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. And we will make sure that websites and social media links, anything you want this audience to know about you and have access to, is in the description for the video.
Wonderful.
Jennifer, this is the first time I'm getting to see Jennifer actually like as a human being and not just an email, um, which is very exciting for me. So I'm really happy to have this
Me
chance to be able to
too.
talk to you and hear more about you, learn about you.
Yeah, Jenna, thanks for including me in this, and Dawn Marie, thanks for inviting us. Um, I actually, Jenna was looking for someone to collaborate with who is autistic, and I don't, it was so long ago now. I think that, what did we do? Oh, you had interviewed me because of my blog. So I have a blog
Uh-huh.
called Full Spectrum Mama that's sort of a hobby blog at this point. I was pretty devoted to it for a while, but then I stopped teaching and started like doing more writing work professionally, and it used to be like once a week. Now maybe it's like 4 times a year posting or something. But she had interviewed me and then asked me to collaborate on the first book, and that's how all of that happened. So yeah, I'm autistic, self-diagnosed in my 20s, professionally diagnosed in my 30s, but I have a lot of opinions about professional paradigms and diagnoses that maybe we'll have time for, maybe we
With
won't.
you on that sometime. I would
Yeah,
enjoy that. I
I'm
might share
my
those opinions.
I'm pretty obsessed with that, and I do a lot of public speaking. I've done a couple keynotes this year. One of them was on professional paradigms. I'm doing another one at Columbia University in the fall on professional paradigms. And yeah, so I mean, I have very mixed feelings about diagnosis, but it brings a lot of tools, and it can bring some insights and things like that. So I think there are pluses to it as well. I have a son who's autistic, who's a young adult. That's where I just sort of was like, dokie dokie do, I'm just gonna go along being my autistic self. And then I sort of shepherded him through the special education system and became radicalized and furious, and also very grateful to like the allies we found along the way and everything. But I really became a very fierce advocate because of him. I had some superpowers academically that sort of enabled me to be successful in my ways. And I was pretty good at like masking. I don't like, I think I watched one of your other conversations, and you were talking about how nice it is not to mask, but I didn't really know what I was doing for a long time. I wasn't very successful, but I was good enough. You know, I got a doctorate, blah, blah, blah. So I was just kind of going along, and I had found, you know, friends and community that I was comfortable with. So, um, I wasn't really thinking that much about neurodivergence until I started really thinking about it with my son, and then got into the blog and got into the books and stuff. I also have a neurotypical daughter who's 18. She's heading to college next year. And then I also have 2 grandchildren at home who are amazing, but they're both under 2. And my son's partner also lives with us in our tiny house. And Jenna knows all about this. We both have a lot on our plates. But of course, we're always over prepared for everything as well. We're like, just kind of, that's one of the reasons that we work really well together, is that we both give 110% always. And I'm sometimes not sure how we do it, honestly. Like, Jenna, I don't know. Because we both, like right now, do we both have crazy eyes? We're like, hey, I'm here. You have no idea what's going on back in the house.
Yep.
But
Yep. My son was walking in the middle of my
yeah,
introduction. I'm like,
yeah,
not the
yeah.
right time. Jeez.
Yeah, I had to warn everybody, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, and
My
so
dogs are currently freaking out, so I just put my,
yeah.
can you hear them?
No, but dogs are pretty
Oh,
welcome on
good.
Zoom, right?
Because here it's insane.
Yeah.
Like a friend is coming over and they don't see this person very often and they love this person and they are going berserk out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, all 3 of my adult children are now moved back in with us. And we did not
Oh,
buy this current house with the idea that other people would move.
that's what
Jenny
we
can
did. We
relate.
downsized. We super downsized, and
Jenny
then
can relate.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I don't know that this is a little bit of a distraction, but like I said, this is just a conversation, 3 buddies hanging out. I often say I don't think I was designed to be a parent.
Mm,
That kind of sense of responsibility and the extra ways in which I love kind of make me a nerve ending all the time. And
yeah.
I also am not somebody who plays with other people.
Yeah.
I used to do theater and stuff like that, and that was lovely, but we all had a role, right? I didn't have to interact. I had
Yeah.
to say my lines. That's a whole different world, right? So I love other people. I like to sit near them.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee shops are wonderful, right? So the way my sensory issues are and my autism is and stuff like that, I social differently, even from a lot of autistic people. Having so many people in the house. There's so many people in the house. And I love them. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. And a lot of family healing is going on right now. And there's so many people in the house, right? And 3 dogs and 3 cats and a ball python and a ferret. And I want a vacation.
That's a lot. I like it. Everyone needs a
Could you
vacation.
just leave me
Yeah.
alone now? Right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's brilliant about the stuff that you 2 are writing is, one, your devotion to really solid research. It's one of the things that my little uh academic loving autistic self just got really excited about. I'm like, oh, look, they talked to these people and they talked to these people, and look, they read this stuff and they did that thing. And it really was affirming to me, really affirming to me to read your first book, Actually Autistic, Actually Autistic Guide to Advocacy. I just found it really comforting, right? I felt like I could trust you both as I read your book and I read your advice, and I felt like I could hand it to somebody and say, hey, if you want to be a good ally, could you please read this book? And I could feel like I was putting the people I knew in good hands. And so I probably have cut you off and switched topics. So if there's more that you want to tell about yourself, please do. I'm also incredibly ADHD. Good luck. Hang on. Sapping and my brain will go 19 other places and I will come back. But always be sure to say what you wanted to say, even if I've taken us on a little journey in the meantime.
Well, I guess coming out of that, I guess I would just say that both of these books we wrote them essentially as the books that we wanted to read. Like we wish they were out there. So with the first one, you know, we wish that people had better attitudes in general about advocacy, self-advocacy, everything. We wanted people to be a little, I'm actually, my doctorate is in sociology. Like I just want to study people and figure out what they really want. How do autistic people want to, how do they want to advocate for themselves? How do they want to be seen? How do they want people to advocate for them? And then we got, I would say, a little bit more, even more sort of affirming and inclusive from all of our experience with that. And at the same time, both of us were raising a teen or a young adult. And we were like, oh boy, like, what do we need to do? And I even felt like there are a lot of adulting steps that I had to really learn the hard way. Nothing was real self-evident for me. And I made so many mistakes. And so with both books, we start like really micro. We start like, you know, in your house, in your room, in your family. And then we kind of take steps going out to bigger and bigger topics. And those topics in both books were entirely shaped. I mean, we had Jenna had the interviews for the first one, and then for the second one, we had some interviews and we had surveys. And so we shaped the topics by that, you know, but we asked really open questions, things like, you know, how did you feel about school? What was good about it? What could have made it better? You know, something like that. So we weren't trying to say like, trying to shape that in any sense beyond that. So the topics are really entirely driven by the responses that we got from people. And so it really was, I think, a very, I taught ethics and bioethics and philosophy for a really long time. And I think they were really driven by that, an ethical framework that really centered the people who we were hearing from. So yeah, I mean, we hope that the people who are reading it, and as an autistic writer, and Jenna is really aligned with this, we really wanted the first people that we're trying to see and speak with and center and reach out to as writers is autistic people themselves. And we also, you know, as an amazing ally, Jenna is speaking to allies, and as a mother who is also an advocate and ally, as well as a self-advocate, as well as just a person. I don't think everybody who's autistic has to self-advocate, right? So that we don't want to put that burden on everybody. It's a choice. We were just trying to speak to all of those people. So it's always nice to hear like that you felt that it was affirming, that you felt that it was inclusive. That's exactly
Yeah,
what.
yeah. That was really good to hear, because I think that that's the whole that's the point of the book, is we want people to walk away with that feeling. And I think that we both really try really hard in our drafts to make it that way. So that feels good to have that kind of response. But this, I think for Jenny and I both, this book was just so immediately relevant to us, the things that are being talked about. So with our own children and what's going on in our own lives. And as I was reading other drafts of the book, as we're doing edits, I'm having conversations with my husband like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we're going through with our oldest son. Like, you need to read the final version of this. We both need to read this together. We need to remind ourselves what advice is being given, because this is exactly what's happening in our home. And so as my son, you know, is trying to navigate all sorts of ways to be independent and transition into adulthood, things that in the interviews, even just in the interviews themselves, I didn't realize how relevant it was. And then, you know, partway through the school year, it's like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what was being talked about. Things like just a lot of things school related. We talk a lot about school and different types of schooling. And I used to be a high school English teacher, so I'm thinking about the things that I'm learning about, like, oh, this is so relevant to teachers. If teachers knew what autistic or neurodivergent people would want as students, that is super relevant to not only special ed, exceptional ed teachers, but just the general education system, administration, people who make policies at their schools. So not just the people that are working directly with kids day to day, but also administrators. But this year especially, my son kind of struggled a little more than he usually does in school. And it was interesting to see how some of the, I don't want to say how supports disappeared, but I think in the school system, specifically this perception that he's fine, kind of carried him so long. And then now that he's a sophomore in high school and he's in advanced placement pre-calculus and advanced placement this, and it's like all of a sudden, whatever was working for him or whatever people thought was fine in the past is not fine. But it's almost like it's difficult to uncover that when you're in elementary school, maybe even when you're in middle school. So he's kind of going through this period of like, how do I learn more about myself and my needs and how I learn, and how do I communicate that to the people around me, because this is something that he'll have to do for the rest of his life. So it's been interesting learning about these things, that this advice that's been given to us, and really just figuring out ways to apply it. And as my son learns more about himself, he becomes more interested in self-advocacy. So he's been interested in, like, he has these opinions, and sometimes he'll be frustrated, but he's also a good writer and he loves writing. And so I was like, it's okay. Why don't you write an op-ed about the lack of unified sports coverage in our paper? Like, just do it. And so he did. And it didn't, I mean, he never got a response, but I was just trying to coach him, like, you don't have to do these things, but you do have the power to. And there's a section in our book just about that. People who, not that you have to advocate in these ways, but if you're interested in advocating on a more global level, there's resources and advice related to that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that are related to what Jenna's saying, that part of the book is actually going to be a free online resource, because our publisher gave us a word limit, but we kind of like didn't really, we had so much material that we really wanted to include. So the whole last, I guess, third or quarter of the book, I can't remember exactly what the word count was.
Quarter, I think.
You were like, we don't want to throw this out, because that whole section is about learning about your rights, and self-advocating, and learning about like how to change cultures, how to change professions. Like it's once you get to that point, like we sort of end with, I don't know, is it like employment and living situations and stuff like that in the print version. But then in this free resource, we do all that bigger, broader stuff, and not just different facts about it, but also how to learn about it, and the legal aspects of it and things like that. And all of it based on, input from autistic respondents to our survey and interviews. And the thing that I sent you, the other thing that we worked really hard on that's also going to be free online is discussion guide. So it's, I think it's 12 weeks or 12 months, however you want to do it as a group or on your own. You can use it for groups or for self-reflection. I think that this idea came out of a talk I was giving when our first book came out, and I had a really big audience. Some of them were friends, and they were super, super supportive. And I was like, oh, and that was the one where my son came with me, who's also autistic, and took over the whole talk and is a real ham. And then we all kind of just hung out afterwards, and I was like, honestly, I really hate public speaking. And they suggested a book group, and they had already started a book group about the book at a local library. And then Jenna and I talked about it, and we did a discussion guide that's free online for the first book. And then we really put, I mean, the second one is like really, I think it's like 30 pages long or something. Like, it's really has it has a synopsis of each chapter, and then it has questions for different stakeholders, like there's questions for self-advocates, questions for parents, and questions for professionals. And then we have questions for everybody that come out of the topic on that, and that will be free online as well. And we do also have, in both books, we have like reflection questions at the end of each chapter, and they're different in the discussion guide. So you can really, like, you can either do the discussion guide on its own, and we're really all about social justice and universal access. So we would like, you want to do that, have it, but you can also do it with the book. So yeah.
That's so cool.
And
But
I was just gonna say, I also heard someone contacted me that they I can't remember the organization, but they were talking about using our first discussion guide for the first book, like at a retreat, like they were going to host a retreat for caregivers. I thought that was so cool.
Oh, that's
That was
fantastic.
such a neat, yeah. And so they had people ordering the book and just using that as part of their sessions. I thought that was so fun. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's
Mhm.
great. So nice.
so it occurs to me that before we started officially doing this recording, we had said the full title of your book, but we have not yet said the full title. So I think,
Okay.
Jennifer, you are the expert at rattling off the title.
I'll say it.
I'm
The
gonna ask
book
you.
coming out from Hachette Jessica Kingsley Press in September 19th is the hashtag actually autistic guide to building independence, a handbook for teens, young adults, and those who care about them.
So you're still just shy of 2 months away from your release date. Is that a sure thing at this point? Because publishers are tricky. They can move your release date around on you. Is that a for sure, or that's a we've been told this, but
Uh,
Yeah, it's been moved a couple times, so we're feeling a little more confident about this maybe than if we were to talk to you 3 months ago. But I wouldn't say that we've gotten the final, like for sure set in stone yet. But that's what we've been told to tell people, and it's already available for pre-sale. It's available for purchase already. So
yeah,
I think that's
a
a good
good
sign.
sign.
That's a good sign.
that's awesome. And will there be an audiobook?
I think so. There was on the first one, and the first that
I
had an
know.
autistic narrator, so it's so fabulous. Hope so. You know what? I'll make a note to ask about that, but I would assume so.
And Dawn Murray, I remember, I think, was it you that was mentioning about, because I think you gave me the great advice that I still need to pass along, I think, about how you were saying it might be helpful if the reader was able to use different voices when there were quotes. Was it you I was talking
Yeah.
to?
So one
You
of the
said
things
sometimes
that
it ran
happened, because
together.
I did listen to your first book, was
Oh.
that when you're reading, you can tell when the voice changes away from the author to somebody else because quote marks.
Yes.
When you're listening, there aren't always obvious ways to tell who's talking.
Mm.
And one of the things that went sideways for me was, and I came to Jenna, I'm like, the language isn't consistent, right? You advocate for identity first, but there's like person first language in here. And you're like, no, those are the quotes. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think there was any way I would have known. So when I'm listening to the book, I need the reader to say quote or
Mm,
something. So like
yeah.
when some of my favorite, all of the authors that I enjoy are writing nonfiction. I'm basically an exclusive nonfiction reader, because I love my nerdy self, but oh my goodness, right? So like, love my nonfiction. Some of the people that I really enjoy are reading their own books, and I think they feel more at liberty to say stuff that isn't actually written in the book. Like, this is a quote now. This is from this person. So they give you those signals. But I think it's in part because they're reading it themselves and they feel more comfortable kind of technically rewriting
Mm.
their stuff slightly so that the listener has
Hmm.
that opportunity. And so it's just maybe who's ever going to do the recording for you, just telling them, if you see a spot where it may not be fully clear that you're quoting a person, even though so-and-so says, then you go back into your words, we don't know what the end of what so-and-so says is, right? So it can even be just an
Yeah.
extra long pause
Yeah.
or picking up with your words and things like that. So for somebody who turns to audiobooks as a disability assistance tool, prior to so people who aren't familiar with my channel and all of that, 2.5 years ago I suffered a TBI. I still have long-lasting impacts from that, and part of it is I have significant chunks of each day where I can't use my eyes for a lot of things. Sometimes I can't process visually at all, and so it's made reading really, really difficult. I'm also dyslexic, so so I started turning to audiobooks as I continue to work on my brain and seeing how far I can get it kind of back into some kind of shape that I'm more used to. I'm doing listening and reading when I can. So when I can listen and read, I can notice things. But when it's an exclusive listen, people who are only hearing are going to need those clues that are visual in your book.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting, I know you're both involved in, disability advocacy and stuff like that. As much as I'm involved in that world, I still learn more all the time
Oh, yeah.
about how to do it better for more people. And I find it deeply fascinating and thrilling when I can find a new way to provide for somebody who's often not provided for. It just makes me really happy. I enjoy that. So we don't have to turn this into a tutorial of how to do an audio.
Well, that's actually something that we talk about a lot in our books, is how well, first of all, speaking to your first issue where you heard language that you found surprising or jarring, we do address that because there are people who have different language preferences. I always identified as Asperger's, and then I learned more about Dr. Asperger and I was like, nope. But yeah, there are still a lot of people who use that word, and it is used in our book. So we did a whole intro in the second book, which is like, here, I think it's like the language section of the introduction or something like that, where we say, okay, here's the language that we use, but we're always growing. Please always let us know if there's something that you want differently. And then on the other side of that is also the fact that I think a lot of the adaptations, as you're talking about learning how to be of more service in the world and more make things more accessible, so many of these evolutions are helpful for all people or many people, like there are people who aren't autistic who, for example, could benefit from there being fidgets available in libraries or a quiet space, or sensory room. Like there's so many people, I'm autistic and I'm also introverted and I have way too many people in my house, but my son is autistic and he's also extroverted and he's really happy about all these people. So I need my little, room where I can be quiet, and he needs the living room. Which is a hot mess. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I'm surprised I found a corner for this corner of my one room
Yeah.
in my house for this for this discussion.
So I very recently changed from sitting at my desk behind me to sitting across from my desk. And now when I'm doing recordings or meetings and things like that, I get very distracted by all of that stuff back there. I
Oh,
used
yeah.
to have a very simple thing. I'd had a blank wall. That little firefly thingy back there is a recent addition when I moved over here. I'm used to just having a blank wall behind my computer when I look at myself with other people. And now there's all this stuff behind me. And I can find it really challenging to keep my brain present because I'm like, oh, can I do this? There, my computer bag's in the,
Right.
it's like,
You can do backgrounds.
right, right. I hate them. I hate
Yeah, I hate
them.
them.
Uh,
Yeah.
I can't tolerate the weird movement. I have a lot of sensory challenges, especially. So one of the things I've learned about neurodivergent people and brain injuries is that whatever volume your sensory challenges were before your brain injury, it's somebody has turned up the volume on all of your sensory challenges times exceptionally. And depending on the type of brain injury, that might last for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. For some people, it never goes away. And for people who have brain injuries a little bit later in life, like me, I'm 55. I was 52-ish, 51, 50. I don't know. I can't do math. I'm just calculating two. Whatever the distance is between now and 2022, only 2 years, right? 2.5 years. You know, when you're a little bit older, the same kind of impact to your brain can affect you more and longer. And the impacts can get worse as you age. So where the current general belief about traumatic brain injury is rest for a couple of weeks, you'll be okay, try not to do it again. We're learning a lot more about what happens for a neurodivergent brain and how the brain might make decisions for the situation that aren't actually useful. The way my autistic brain will kick into gear to try to keep things standard and understand the rules and all of those things. There's a theory right now that one of the reasons why I haven't been able to overcome the instability and dizziness is that my autism actually learned an instability rule. And my brain is giving inaccurate information to my body, and my body is giving inaccurate information to my brain. So I'm working with a vestibular specialist and a neurologist trying to piece together, is it possible to get my brain and body talking accurately to each other again?
Okay.
Or am I a little hardwired now to be unstable on my feet, to be afraid of falling all the time, to feel dizzy all the time?
Oh,
No inner ear problem. There's no eye problem. This is a way my brain has decided the world is.
yeah.
Trying to help, right? So it's really interesting the number of things that are different for us when we're autistic, ADHD, things like that. That if you're not that identity, oh my gosh, I love your dog.
Oh,
He won't let me do this without
What is
making
his
it
name?
oh,
Ramon.
Ramon, you are Cruella de Vil. Do you know that?
yes, I love him
No,
so
this is
much.
Beautiful.
He's
I
beautiful.
like Cruella, so
sorry,
that
he
was
was scratching and scratching.
yeah.
Don
I
Marie, I think I mentioned I also have a TBI.
yeah.
I went over the front of my bike in 2011 and knocked out my front teeth
Whew,
and knocked out myself. And
jeez.
I had I've been autistic my whole life. I used to get migraines maybe 2 or 3 times a year from lights, flashing lights, certain smells. And after the migraine, I had daily migraines for maybe a year or two. Sorry, after the TBI, I had daily migraines. Then it went down to once a week and then once a month. And now I'm probably back. But there are definitely, I do think that the intersection of neurodivergence and traumatic brain injury is a very fertile area for study because I think that it's probably true that our brains may well adapt differently after an injury like that. I also found I had some emotional challenges for a while after that. I would get stuck. I probably got stuck. I mean, again, I'm autistic. Sometimes I might perseverate, but I definitely perseverated more. But I've been working on it. There is healing. You can
Yeah.
heal. Gotta try a lot of different things, I would say.
Yeah, that is for real. And if you ever want to come back and do a TBI deep dive with me, there's so little known about it, especially
Right.
the neurodivergent community, Because one of the things I've been figuring out for myself is, as a person who has meltdowns that can include hitting myself in the head, it is possible, likely, this is by far not my first brain injury.
Mhm.
So from childhood, having a meltdown that includes, it's very likely I came to this significant traumatic brain injury with multiple smallers before, and we're learning now what multiples can do to a person and stuff like that. So there's just so much that is known or not widely shared, and not widely shared, is not quite yet known, as well as the personal experience of you, me, and maybe a couple of others that we could toss into a fun conversation. But to me, it's a really important topic for the
Yeah.
neurodivergent community.
I think that speaks also to what we were talking about early on, and that again might have been before we started recording, but just this idea of professional paradigms and the way, the lenses through which they view neurodivergence and how neurodivergence might be studied is definitely something that intersects with that. If there is a perhaps a different approach that might be necessary for a neurodivergent person with a brain injury, or, you know, someone at one of the keynotes I gave this spring asked me a question and I had no idea of the answer, but it relates to what you're saying on some level. She asked me about neurodivergence, autism and addiction, and saying that, you know, and we had there were I don't know, maybe a couple hundred, 1,000 people there at that talk, but we had sort of like a group conversation about, well, not just why there's no research into that, but why addiction might be very prevalent in autistic populations because of our sensory and other, you know, neurological, and as a result of having a lot of challenges, also sometimes emotional and mental health challenges because of how hard it is to be neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, that we could be prone to numbing ourselves, or we could be prone to wanting to escape. I'm hypoglycemic, so I can't drink more than 1.5 drinks, but if I could, I probably would. You know, like sometimes the world is really just really too much for me. And there isn't none of us could find that there's any research out there that, you know, so there are professional paradigms in terms of the way, what I call like the diseasification of neurodivergence, the pathologization of it, the way people look at it as something to be cured or something that's a deficit or a lack. But there's also professional, I would say, issues in the sense that some very important topics are not necessarily having participants who would contribute to insight for what neurodivergent people experience differently. AFAB neurodivergent people also, you know, or male, you know, is probably more research done on autistic males than female, you know, all that kind of stuff is ripe for evolution, to say the least.
Absolutely. And I'm having about 8 million different thoughts because you've said like so many
I'm sorry. Yeah,
brain happy. No, that was not an I'm sorry. Like I'm thinking poor Jenna's never gonna get another word in edgewise because Jennifer and I are just, we have found a happy place.
That's okay.
No, this is not
I'll
a
just sit back here.
I'm just
Interest
really
going on.
enjoying this. There's so much that we don't look at appropriately just in terms of being a human, right? The fact that that there is actually a remarkable percentage of the population that doesn't land in the binary of sex.
Gender, yeah. Yeah.
Well, gender's one. So in my world, gender is one
Oh,
thing.
and sex
That's a
too.
thing we
Yeah, yeah.
assign.
Right.
But for
Yeah.
sex, that
That's true. Yeah.
there are people who see the outside of their body, which is how we determine sex. We look at the outside of the body. and find out much later in life because of a medical challenge that actually they have, you know, externally they look male, but internally they look very female. Or there are people who externally look very female and have hormone imbalances where, you know, they end up with very broad shoulders and facial hair and things like that. So as a world, we haven't been willing to admit diversity that happens in every natural space on the planet, right? We have asexual reproducing plants and animals. We have penguins that are gay. We have, right? Like, we haven't been willing to admit the beautiful diversity of the natural world at the most basic levels. So no, we're not doing good research. I mean, it's only in the last few decades that medical science has decided to understand if the same things that work for men actually work for women, or if maybe we should think of it differently, right? Literally just a few decades that we've started to do sex female based research in medicine.
So that's
Everything was male.
yeah, that's definitely one of the things that Jenna and I were really, really mindful of including. In fact, we explicitly had an intersectional focus for our book. We wanted to center like people of color, center people LGBTQIA plus two-spirit people. Like I myself identify as non-binary. I use she, they pronouns. And we also, like, without having like a super scientific sample, you know, we discuss how it may be that autistic people have more diverse gender expressions and identities because we don't necessarily buy into the like early on or catch on, you know, whether we buy into it or catch on or whatever. We're just like, I don't know. We're kind of making it up our own thing, you know, and for better or worse, but in the sense of gender diversity, I think it's amazing and beautiful. You know, we just kind of go our own way in that regard. So there is a ton of research out there showing that gender identity and gender expression is very different. Diversity is much higher in autistic populations. I just, from my own personal experience, speculate that it's just because sometimes we tend to find our own way more. Maybe we think divergently, and that makes us come up with really what our own idea is about what we might want to be or who we are and all of that. But that's a different topic than professional paradigms. So I don't know if Jenna, did you want to speak to that as well? What we were trying to look at?
Yeah. Well, and we tried at the outset just to make sure that we were distributing the survey in diverse areas, and we partnered with a magazine called the Tester magazine, and that's actually how that's how the survey came about. Jenny and I kind of had the idea of this sort of book that we were thinking, kind of the seeds of the idea. And then I was approached by somebody who found my blog, and they were from Detester magazine, which is like, it's a youth-led platform, and they are like, their whole goal is to amplify youth voices, socio-political issues, working for the rights of people of color and people who are marginalized. So they were interested in distributing a petition of trying to advocate for better inclusion in schools. And I'm sorry, my lighting is like weird now because like the sun is coming through my window at a weird.
Look angelic.
Very
I feel
ethereal.
like I'm like, yeah. Okay, sorry about that. Maybe
Come
that's a little
back to us, Jenna.
there we go. So at that, so at the time we didn't really have, I didn't have the capacity to execute their campaign exactly how they wanted, but I mentioned like, hey, actually, you know, Jenny and I are working on the ideas of this book, and this actually kind of sounds like it's aligned with what the point of this petition would be. So they helped kind of formulate the survey and distribute the survey along a lot of their audiences. They worked with an organization to make a different version of the survey that was shorter and written in plain language, so it'll be more accessible. And so that was helpful in just partnering just to make sure that we're getting our reach out in the right spaces. So I had a fairly large audience from my blog, and Jenny had one from her blog, but it helped having another partner that was really dedicated to that mission just professionally already, to also make sure that we're reaching people and getting and hearing from marginalized communities or people that might not have already been in our networks.
That's
Young
awesome.
people,
Mhm.
yeah, especially.
That's amazing.
And we're donating 10% of the royalties to what is the exact name of it, Jenna,
It's
now?
it's the People of Color Fund. Hold on, it's through. Okay, I'm gonna look it up because it's the Autistic People of Color Fund. It's the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. It's through them, but they basically collect money for all sorts of different initiatives. You can apply for grants and receive money for all sorts of different things, from very simple to very complex. And so it serves autistic people of color. And we thought that group aligned well with like the audience we were trying to reach and people we're trying to serve and people we're trying to partner with for this book.
That's amazing. If you would please, when you send like your social links and your websites and your headshots and all of that for the video content, would you please include a link to both Detest Your Magazine and the organization that you just mentioned? Because I'm sure people are going to want to go check both of those out.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm so excited about this new book coming out, the work that you are both doing. I'm hoping, like, I know we already talked about 45 different ideas about how to get your message out. But I'm hoping that there are opportunities for us to do more in the future so that people can hear from you. I want them to read your books. I want them to get neck deep in them and share them and all of those things. But I also think there's something deeply beautiful and powerful when you get to hear from the authors themselves and get to know them. The printed page or the audiobook becomes a whole new experience when you can get to know the humans behind the words. So I do hope there's more that we can do. Is there anything, especially Jenna, because I just took over. Sat very sweetly and quietly and waited.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, either of you, before we wrap up, that you want to make sure if people are watching the whole hour, and some of them do, right? If they're watching the whole hour, what do you want them to know?
I think Jenny mentioned this earlier, but I think I want to underscore it because it speaks to kind of why I started my blog. I feel like our books I feel like you can pick it up and feel like it's a safe resource that's coming directly from the autistic community. So not only are all of our contributors autistic, we try to include almost all of our research and citations are from autistic authors, or we're mentioning when they're not. So it's a very authentic resource, and obviously Jenny's an autistic writer but editor, so it's like it's going through these different like filters. The woman that we spoke with at Detest Your Magazine, she identifies as autistic. So I feel like these are the type of books that I like reading and I look for as a parent, as an advocate. So I like that we can produce something that people can pick up and just know that they're just reading stories. They're reading stories that are coming right from the community and reading how people feel. And I think that I really value the authority of personal experience. I think people can downplay anecdotes and people can downplay anecdotal research, but I don't live in that camp. I think that we've incorporated a lot of voices, and I think that there is something powerful about one person's experience, even if it's contradictory to someone else's. So I like the idea of raising that up and giving people the power to tell their story and honoring that. And I think this book does a great job of that.
Amazing. Jennifer, what about you? Anything you want to
Just, I guess I'll say if anybody actually did watch to the actual end of this, that if you're autistic, we are thinking about writing a next book, which is something like It Gets Better or Chicken Soup for the Autistic Soul. I'm vegetarian, so I'd like to say seitan soup, like wheat gluten soup, but for the autistic soul. So what we're hoping to do is get a bunch of autistic adults to write a letter to their younger self, kind of thing. Like, what do you wish you had known? What you know, where are your strengths? What inspires you? What, stuff like that. I mean, it's still a little bit amorphous, but if people are interested in contributing to that or thinking about that, they should be able to contact us through our socials and the blog links, et cetera, that we'll give you for this.
That's awesome. It's the autistic tea, right? When you say
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
people are gonna think you're weird, but at some point you're gonna be happy about being weird and you're gonna embrace it. Stuff like that. I mean, we've got some of that in our books now, but like I would
Yeah.
just love to have a whole book full of stuff like that.
Yeah, in their own voices. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and
that's neat.
practical stuff too, so whatever it is, we'll just be the editors and we'll look at like what are the letters that we got and what are the topics that we need to focus on, like we have with the prior two, like what's important to people.
That's amazing. I will help you find your humans.
Goody.
Great.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for this. An hour is never long enough with people that I adore talking with.
Thanks, Don.
So thank you for doing it. When you think about this, if you decide, wow, there was stuff I didn't get a chance to say, and you want to hop back on, we can do minis, right? We can just do like little tag on, 5-minute, 15-minute, whatever. If there's something that you really feel like you wanted to say, let's make sure that it gets said.
Thank you.
Because
Thank
this is
you.
a very ADHD-led conversation.
Hey.
As my entire YouTube channel is. So I appreciate you both. I'm cheering you on. I will always be trying to help in any way I can. And I'm excited to read this next book when it comes out, hopefully on September 19th of 2024.
Thanks. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Anne-Marie.
You're so welcome.